To kick off tonight's Phobia Week on the project, I was going to say Project Week on the Phobia.
I'm scared of it.
We are going to be looking at someone we're going to be looking behind those irrational fears that make you feel totally powerless. Not like my personal fear of slugs. That is 100% rational. Thank you very much.
Feeling intense fear as your plane crashes to Earth. A deadly snake bites you, or your house is burning down with you inside. Totally justified. But when your brain hijacks that emergency response for harmless triggers, that's the anxiety disorder known as a phobia, and it ruins nearly 1 in 10 lives.
The human being is an anxiety machine. Anxiety is the price we pay for that ability to imagine the future.
Science says the cause is part genetics, part evolution, and part brain mechanics. First, blame your parents. Mice who got a nasty zap while smelling cherry blossoms had baby mice who were afraid of just the smell of cherry blossoms. No zap necessary.
You're not born genetically with a phobia, but there's good evidence to suggest that you might have a predisposition towards developing a phobia.
You could also blame your parents' 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 parents. It's normal to be a bit jumpy around snakes. Why? Because your ancestors who weren't afraid of snakes, well, they died out pretty quick. That fear was bred into you. Finally, blame your brain. Your amygdala is in charge of memory and emotions. And research shows it's smaller and more hyperactive in people with arachnophobia.
So there's a trigger response, sends a signal into your thalamus, which sends a signal into your amygdala. That amygdala starts sending neurochemicals into your body.
The good news is there's a fix. A brain workout known as exposure therapy has patients gradually facing their fears, essentially teaching the amygdala to dull its response to phobias like creepy crawlies.
There is an element you have to be a bit brave. You know that you're going to have to face up to the thing that you really fear.
While the science is complicated, the solution could be a simple rewire, and that starts by taking a deep breath.
Your body's anxiety or fear response, it'll go up, you'll get all sort of worried, but eventually over time, your body goes back down again. And that's your body and your brain learning, hey, this is okay.
Yeah, and just a warning, if you're afraid of spiders, you might not have enjoyed some of that. Now, Kyle McDonald is a psychotherapist. He specialises in helping people overcome phobias, and he joins us now. Please welcome Kyle. Hi.
Thank you.
Hey, Kyle. Welcome to the show. All right, make us feel better about our fear of spiders. What's the most interesting phobia you've run across?
The most interesting kind of weird one I've found is trypophobia, which is actually a fear of very small holes that look like skin pores.
I've got it.
Shower heads.
I've got
loads
that one.
of flowers.
Crumpets.
Seriously, I do.
One.
Yeah.
Crumpets is okay, but there are certain ones, things with unnatural
They're not great,
holes.
are they?
Weird.
It is easy to kind of make light of these phobias. I don't know if you heard, but I've got a really silly one. I know it's silly, slugs, but I do find it really stressful. Just how serious can phobias get?
Well, they can be really serious because we measure the severity of any psychiatric problem by how much it interferes with day-to-day life. So if you have a fear of heights, it might not be that great a deal, but if you're phobic to the point where you can't take a job on the 10th floor, then that has quite an impact.
So, Kyle, what we want to know is, if we have one of these, what can we do about it? What can you advise? What professional help can we get?
Well, the treatments pretty much come down to the specific versus the general. So the exposure therapy is the specific, dealing with the actual phobia itself and gradually getting used to what you're afraid of. Often it's important to do the general bit as well, which is actually dealing with anxiety in a more general way, because often people who have phobias are also generally quite anxious by disposition.
Can you explain another part of my psyche? When I hear that Kana is scared of slugs, I immediately want to get a slug and put it in front of her. Why is that?
Well, I think that might be antisocial.
All right, cool.
I'm not sure we have a treatment for
My
that.
issue, okay.
We're going to talk about this in more detail later in the week, but for parents watching whose child might have a phobia or a developing phobia, what's your advice to them?
Well, I think the important thing is to actually not sort of concretise it too much, to not make too big a deal of it. Kids get frightened of things all the time. You know, you read them a particular book and they get freaked out by spiders. So don't make too big a deal of it, but Generally help them relax is the best thing. Teach them anxiety management strategies in a general way, like mindful and relaxation breathing, that sort of thing.
Phobias being connected to anxiety makes sense to me. You're panicking, you're freaking out, that sort of, but phobias can also be a trigger and lead to a depression. How does that work?
Well, I mean, if it interferes in your life to the point where it actually causes problems, then that brings our mood down. So any assessment it's going to be important to figure out whether the depression or the anxiety comes first.
We're learning how much these can impact people's lives. Is there enough support out there for people who are dealing with this and need some help?
Well, there isn't enough support generally for anxiety, and actually it's one of the reasons why I'm running for the Auckland DHB this year. So I'd really appreciate it, Auckland, if you could spare a vote for me.
Oh, here we go.
Any of the City Vision Health team, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah. What is the yearning for acceptance on TV? What's that? No, I'll move on. We talked about phobias, you can cure them. Presumably they can get worse. What's something that starts as a normal fear can become irrational. Is that true?
Yeah, so the key thing there, and actually the main feature of phobias is avoidance. Once we start to avoid that which we're afraid of, then actually our fear increases. And exposure therapy, of course, is the opposite of that. We start to confront what we're afraid of, and over time, hopefully, we realise it's not terrifying.
Great advice. We'll keep getting it this week. Please thank Kyle McDonald.